Right. Laird Hamilton, you've changed your mind on some stuff. I think we all have, but we're just going to jump right into it. What are a few things that you've changed your mind on in the last, let's just say 10 years?
Well, I'd say alcohol first, but that's been a little longer than 10 years now. I'm almost doubled that in. So, but I grew up with alcoholic parents, and so alcohol was normal around my house. I grew up around a lot of people that drank, and so it was a little bit normal for me to drink and drink. I like wine. Ultimately, I was a wine. I went to France for 20 years. I became a connoisseur of good wine, and somehow wine, gets a good rap because it's, with dinner, and it's, there's a lot of elegance with it and fancy words, and, but for me, I could perform. I can, drink a bottle of wine, wake up 5 a.m., train like a monster, surf no problem. So I could always use it. And it was more of I was proving that no big deal. Like, oh yeah, no, that doesn't affect me. I have no problem with it. And then, but I always say all the dumbest things that you ever do are when you're drinking. But I got to a point where it was, my mom said to me once, if you can't be true to yourself, then you can't be true to anyone else. And I would always say, I can stop anytime. And I'd stop for a week, and then I'd go back, stop for a month, stop for 3 months, stop for 6 months. And I'd always start to drink again. And then finally I just got sick of that. I was like, well, that's, if I can can I be a man of my word to myself? And so then one day, and I don't know how much I had been drinking or what I'd been doing, but it wasn't good. It wasn't, and I didn't, and I have my daughter, my daughters were babies. And I just was like, I don't want to, my relationship, my children, like, I don't want that influencing my environment. I don't want them growing up with thinking that that's normal. If they have it and do it on their own, that's great. And so I just was like, okay, that's it. And I just took my wine bottle and put a Pellegrino bottle right there. And after that, I think I'm going 17 years, but that was probably the biggest, one of those, it was all good. And then I went, yeah, no, that's not happening. I'm finished. I'm finished with that. And that's been amazing. Actually, it's been, best thing ever. So, but what I realized after too, is that it was really just, I call it the highest level of sugar addiction. That really, when people talk about sugar, they're like, oh, I'm worried about sugar. I go, do you drink? I go, if you drink, don't even talk to me. Like, don't even talk to me about your sugar, because the volume of sugar that you're consuming when you're drinking is so beyond, because it's liquid. And so the absorption is amazingly efficient, and it's liquid with alcohol. So it's another level of absorption. Yeah. And so, and I think we're already programmed to do that naturally. I think we start with mother's milk that's highly sweet. We go into cereal that's highly sweet. We go into sodas and it's highly sweet. And then we just work our way up to alcohol, and that's the king.
It's a good point. Never looked at it like that.
And I think my revelation around the sugar relationship was that I never had desserts and I didn't have a sweet tooth. And when I stopped drinking, where was the dessert? Where was this? I had a crazy sweet tooth. I was just, anything with sugar, I wanted it. And I was like, wow, like those are the guys that aren't getting fed. Like, those guys aren't getting fed, and they're like, hey, we need to be fed. Yeah. We're going to die off if you don't give us what we want. And then once I was through that part, then that it just went away. But that would probably be that would be one of the biggest shifts. I mean, I think there's been a few other ones that don't take as much discipline. I don't have a ton of things. I've worked I've gone along, and maybe some of the beliefs I had 10 years ago about diet, not so maybe aware of, all the bad oils, not like that. The bad oils weren't really in my radar. I wasn't putting them on the front of things. Some things that I made worse, I kind of, all of a sudden I changed some of those view as well. I guess the example of that would just be, you can get on a crazy, like fat was a big one. Like, oh, we always just, we were so bred, oh, fat's bad, Dad, stay away from fat. And then you start to realize, well, no, fat's pretty great. And it's just, you need good fat, like that kind of stuff. You make those shifts and, maybe the understanding of wild, that just wanting more wild stuff like that, those shifts of being more concerned about it and not necessarily shifting from thinking that this one thing wasn't good, but just realizing that it was just a lot better. But a lot of it came, there's been a slow process towards that. I mean, I think with, trying to have a food company, that's made me highly aware of the abuse in the system, like, because when you try to make things out of whole foods without a bunch of stuff in them, and and you realize there's little tricks like, if it's less than a certain percentage, you don't have to say it's in it, or if you just separate the molecules and call it two things, it doesn't, it's the same thing, but now it's only 2% each one, but together they're 4. Like, there's all kinds of cool little things that you learn. You're kind of like, I thought this label was the label.
Yeah.
I thought the label was the label. And just, you can go deeper than that. And of course, you can go in all directions, and, all the things that I thought were true that aren't true, or, that stuff. There's no end to that. Just, start studying.
Yeah. When we look at, like, let's say, like, I know you are big into, I guess I would call, or Mark Sisson would call, like, fractal eating, right? Like, it's just sort of this eating when you're not having any deliberate time between meals. Sometimes it's 12 hours, sometimes it's 16 hours, whatever. Is that something that you've always done, or is that something that you've kind of had a shift on over the last, like, 10, 15 years? Like, did you always look at, or was ever a time when I think a lot of us when we're younger, we tend to feel like we need to constantly fuel, right? We need to add more fuel. We need to do this. And we kind of, as we get older, tend to learn, like, oh, maybe we don't need as much of that, a little less of this, like, gluttony mentality when it comes to food, and a little bit more of like, oh, well, my body's capable of doing this, and something that you and I have talked about. I'm just curious kind of where you've shifted over the last, like, maybe 10, 15 years with that as you've hit 60. And after this video, I put a link down below for probably one of the coolest things I've seen in the biohacking world yet, let alone used. And it is a red light therapy blanket. So you can't make fun of me for red light therapy anymore, because the science is way too strong, and it definitely works. And the military uses it, professional athletes use it, sports teams use it. Definitely works. The problem is you really need, like, full body coverage. So a lot of times people end up having to go to, like, really expensive tanning beds, sort of things that are actually red light therapy beds. Anyway, the point is that Bond Charge has a red light therapy, like, blanket. It's like a sleeping bag that you get in, where they've managed to get the 660 nanometer wavelength red light into a flexible sort of diode that you can actually crawl in this thing like a sleeping bag. And it's very reasonably priced when you consider how much it costs to typically go in a red light therapy bed. So just make sure you use that code that is down below in the description next to the link there for 25% off any of their products, but specifically in this case, their red light therapy blanket, which is more like a sleeping bag.
Yeah, I definitely think the waiting to, eating less, or not, I shouldn't say eating less often. Again, if I go hard, like if I'm having multiple days in a row of giant surf, and day 3 or 4, I am hungry in the morning. Yeah. Like, I'm going to eat breakfast. I'm going to eat some giant breakfast because my system is, but being aware of that, I think being aware of the output to need, like how much output are you putting, how much, what do you need? Like, are you hungry right now? Like, have you been multiple days in an environment and doing things that you couldn't eat? You need to eat like 3 meals a day for the next 3 days, right? And kind of having a relationship with that, being more in tune with that. I've done in the past, I've done fasting for long periods of time, and, so I'll kind of, colon cleanse for don't eat for, for 10 days. And I've done stuff, a bunch of different things, master cleanses and those things over the years, just as kind of as someone that, as an extremist in certain ways, like, oh, I don't need to eat. I can not eat, like, and a discipline thing, because part of it's that, right? So, And I think my discipline obviously has become better as I've gotten older. I'm a little more disciplined. Obviously, alcohol was a reflection of that. The ability to fast when or to push the meal to the. I mean, at one point I went to, and this was one of the hardest things and it still is difficult. I went to Paul Check, and who's a friend of mine, and I had him do an assessment, and I did he assessed, I measured this to that. What are you eating? What are you sleeping? What toothbrush? What's everything you're doing? And at the end I go, oh, great. He's going to give me an awesome workout. And I sat down and he said, okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to put marbles in a bowl. I'll dump the marbles on the floor, sit on the couch and pick the marbles up with your toe and put them in the bowl. I'm like, okay, like dexterity of the toes. Okay, cool. I could probably use that. Okay, but I'm like, what else? And then he's like, and then rest on Sunday. And I'm like, did you say rest on Sunday? Like, rest on Sunday. Like, that was his, at the end of the whole thing, like, that's what he was saying. And so, and I think, in a way, I think part of what, because I've always been more, I mean, obviously in the pursuit of riding giant waves and jumping off cliffs and paddling for hours and all these things, it's always about more, right? It's always about that higher volume. And I think that to be okay with not more, like how do I make it so that I don't do anything on Sunday? Or just active rest. Like, my idea on Sunday would be like, okay, you're not going to train on Sunday. Okay, well, so what am I doing? I'm going to do, 6 rounds of ice and heat or whatever. Like, so, but really making a conscious effort to do that. I think that's been a shift. Try to train smarter, not harder. Like, it's like, cause I'm always, and part of it's been injury, part has been a necessity to kind of like, modify things and be smart about it and not always have to just go to failure and have that kind of mentality, which has its value and moments, and there's a time for it. But I think the volume of it, I mean, I got a hip, I got thing, I broke this, broke that. So, I got all kinds of stuff I'm always dealing with that have come from that excessive kind of thing. And so how do I, navigate that and still be productive with it? And you can come to respect doing breath work on the floor for an hour and having it be as valuable as any hour-long circuit, pool training, ice, heat thing I can do. So looking at things and understanding the true benefit of them and not just always correlating it to aggression, output, like that kind of, that there are some things that you actually need that could be more beneficial, that aren't just completely hammering you every single time. And so it's coming from my mentality that sometimes is hard to believe. Like, it's hard for me to really get that around. And I still, to this moment, can still have to deal with and sometimes is this a narrative I'm creating to make me feel good about me doing less?
Seem calmer.
Whatever story, because we always look for a story to justify whatever we want to do. Mm-hmm. So we're always going to be, okay, but no, it's not. By the way,
it also could be the universe's way of telling you, and it knows how you are, and it's a way to tell you to calm down. And the only way that you're going to calm down is if you do actually have an actual story that you firmly believe. And who cares if you're the only one that believes it? And because by putting the label on that, like, you've created this label to purposely, then you're furthering yourself down that rabbit hole anyway. Might as well live and let it be, right? First off, what does your proximity to failure look like in terms of like the frequency of your training? Like, how often do you actually go to failure, if you had to put a number on it, or is it completely like just at random? And then on average, what proximity to failure are you usually training at? Like, do you have a sweet spot? And it doesn't have to be with resistance training. It can be with VO2. It can be with pool training. Like, all these things, you're the master of being able to sort of downregulate and like get through things. So it might be hard to quantify and put a number, but like, how close do you kind of flirt with that edge?
Well, I mean, I think I do it by feel. Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm feeling it, like, and the truth is that, I mean, okay, the ice can do it very well. The ice is you're gonna be hypothermic. Like, you're gonna the result's gonna be. I mean, it's the weight does it. I think what does it for me, heat is, you get nauseous and feel sick, and is that failure or not failure? You're kind of dancing on the line. I don't know if, the pool and the breath and the, that wall seems to be the most taxing on you because of the nature of it represents psychologically kind of drowning, whatever. So there's a death aspect to it. So there's some, and you get, and it's not like a death thing, but it's more like that's the taxation where I know that if I do some drills in the water where I do, and again, max breath hold, is it to failure? Could I go further? Yeah, I'm dancing with if I do go failure, I go unconscious. Yeah. So where is, and I haven't gone unconscious. So I know that, and I've been unconscious before doing it, but I eliminated the way that happened by just not doing what that lead. There's a way to go and do stuff in the pool that you can go unconscious very easily, like it's almost without any notice. And so I don't do that. I make sure that there's more than enough notice so that I can't, because that's the protection. But I know when I do that, if I go to multiple max breath holds, that I'm, and I can do 3 or 4 of those in one session when I'm feeling good, like when I feel up to it. Because part of it is like, you just have to, it's like, I have to be in the mood. Like it's a little bit like, there's a story about and it's a beautiful story, which I always repeat, which is about a kid at a roller coaster. And the little kid, they go, "Hey, you want to go on the roller coaster?" And the kid's like, "I'm really scared." And everybody goes, "Oh, you don't need to be scared." And then the guy's like, "No, that's not right. You need to be scared because this is scary. But are you in the mood to be scary?" And the little kid goes, "Yeah." And then he goes on it, or he goes, "No, I'm not." And he does it. But it's, are you in the mood to be that? So in a way, I need to be in the mood to push that on that thing, and not be influenced. It's hard not to be influenced about the people, the thing, who's doing what. I think I've become better at that, better at not having it, not being led by, I'll show these guys, like somebody's here and let me show them what I can do and how much and all that stuff. I think that's where you get into trouble. I do it when I feel it, on the day I feel it, how I feel it, when I want to. That's how I control that. Like how I feel. And that seems to be something that it's definitely been that's something I've been working on as a change, to be able to control that system. But yeah, when you do 3, like I said, when you do these max breath hold drills, you're just done. Like you just you fall asleep in the afternoon at lunch and your spaghetti or whatever. I don't know spaghetti, but unless there's some good noodles or something, but that's very rare. Unless Gabby convinced me, well, these are such and such noodles. I'll be like, okay, I'll have a couple of them, begrudgingly. But yeah, so I think it's that. I think that's it's going to happen in the ocean. Like it's going to happen when we do certain things, when we go to certain places. That's different than training, because training, you're willingly subjecting yourself to it. Yeah. Now in the ocean, you're going to go out to some remote place, and it's going to be probably not the most, hospitable environment, and then you could be subjected to a situation during the day at the time, whether it's flying down a wave at 40, 50 miles an hour or whatever you're doing, and not wanting to slap your head. You're going to have that kind of that max effort, and that doesn't, you don't get to choose that one. That one, you're just subjected to that, which is probably why that when you are making conscious choices to do it, you're a little more picky. You're a little more like, today I feel like it, today I don't feel like it, and you got nothing to prove. Because the ocean, it might demand it. It might demand it on a ride, or in a in a crash or some situation, or your friend goes down and you got to go deal with it or whatever that is. Like all that stuff always is, those are max efforts,
Yeah. How has your relationship changed now when it comes down to even the pursuit of big waves? I mean, and if you have to be like totally real with yourself, like what are you seeking out of it now versus maybe even 15 years ago? Or is it eerily the same? I mean, if you had to kind of put a finger on like what today, like what is the emotion? What is the sensation? What is the actualization? Like, what are you after today compared to 10 or 15 years ago?
Well, I don't need anybody to see it.
Yeah.
I don't need anybody to see it. And maybe 10, I probably didn't need anybody to see it 10 or 15 years ago. I might never, ever have actually needed anybody to see it, but that wouldn't have done anything. I had to have people see it, just because that's what it took. Yeah. And, but yeah, I definitely have the desire is a little more patient.
Yeah.
But the aspiration might be a little more elaborate. I think it's a little more elaborate, my pursuit. I'm good right now. Like I'm good as far as I know I see what I want to do. I know where I want to do. I have ideas where I want to do it. And I'm patient in organizing what it's going to take and who it's going to be with, and I don't need anybody to see it ever. But I'll probably do some things that people will see. I think I've taken. Listen, my pursuit, my natural pursuit of what I did was always kind of based around that. Like when I do it how I want it, do it how I want when I want. I've had the fortune to do that. But there were some other things that were influencing me. I think part of that was proving stuff. I think that was a piece of it. I got to prove, part of that would just be to, the proof to get be able to make a living at it. Hard to make a living at it if no one sees you doing it. So you kind of gotta be like, hey, you got to see it, and then somehow you can benefit monetarily, because otherwise, if no one sees it, then I got to be on an excavator or something. I got to be doing something else to subsidize that. So part of it was out of that, but my approach has always been when I want, how I want, and because I think that's the only way I could get myself around doing what I wanted to do. I needed to be able to, and yeah, there's a relentlessness to that. That may be more driven than even somebody who's pursuing something that's a little more, compartmentalized or, boxed and made, and here's these games, this thing, these events, this tour, this thing. I think mine could be a little more, all encompassing than that, like every day, all day long lifestyle, just everything you eat, sleep 24/7, 60 years going, could be like, not like, hey, I did that, or I still do it, but it's like my so that pursuit is the desire. It definitely changes, and I just want to do some things I haven't done. That continues to be the most interesting part. Yeah, not going back and doing what you've done to show people you can do it still, or trying to possess that. There's a great quote by a stuntman that I always respected. It was like, never let your memories be bigger than your dreams. I got some big memories, but I got some bigger dreams. The dreams are way, way bigger than and who knows if those will, maybe the pursuit of those will allow me to achieve some other things of less degree. They won't be the dream. It's nice having a goal that just kind of moves out ahead of you, keeps you pursuing. Like if you set up something that you can achieve too quickly, it seems like then you get there and then you're like, now what? And so it's nice to have an elusive one that keeps you driving forward. And I definitely have picked that.
Yeah, for sure. But it's almost like it's less of the word pursuit anymore and more of, I'm hearing there's a lot more of like live and let be in that pursuit versus like, what is the, my therapist had told me a quote that was really interesting that was like really resonated. And it was like, basically drive yourself, don't be driven, because that was my problem, right? It's very, very driven, very driven. When you think about driven, like you're being driven by an external force, you're being driven. Someone else is driving you, right?
Yeah.
And it's like when you factor media into the equation, when you factor content into the equation, you think about it, you're like, this is an element of audience capture in a certain way. And it forces you to dig deep and be like, is this who I really am? And I'm not talking about the big magnum opus of like being a surfer or me looking a certain way and what people expect me to look like and articulate. I know to a certain degree that's many elements of that are who I see myself in the mirror and who that this avatar is, right? But then when you get down to the brass tacks of like, okay, what is it that I want to do? Like when the lights are off, when the camera's off, like what is it that's not going to necessarily even bring me joy, but what is this? Like if I were to just drive myself, if I was told you can go anywhere in the world right now and do anything that you want, and fear was out of the equation, what would it be? Right. But if the cameras are on, it changes things.
Oh yeah. Always.
Yeah.
Always. Because it captures a piece of your soul.
Yeah, it does.
So but in that respect, I think, also too, when I always, you part of it is frustration drives you. So you're frustrated and you're getting driven to this summit that you're pursuing, you going, hey, I'm frustrated. I want to get up there. And then you get to the place and then you're like, cool, now I'm up here. Now what it's driving me. And then changing frustration to contentment and being trying to be driven by contentment, then how do you do that? How do you say, hey, I'm content. Now, how do you be driven? And so I always would say, well, what's your intentions? Why are you doing it? And then at that point, I had to ask myself, why are you doing it? And I was like, well, because I love this. Like I love riding waves. Like for me, it is like, it's just, there's nothing that I've ever done that brings me more stillness and presence and makes me feel accomplished than I do when I ride waves. So then I'm like, okay, well, what kind of waves? Big waves, small waves, long waves, fast waves, all these different, any kind of wave, like in the pursuit of it. So that's been, and that was the original thing that it started with, was that I loved it. When I was a kid, I just loved to get hit by waves and, ride waves on a, McDonald's lunch tray or a piece of wood or a, broken, anything, just be bumped around and be in the ocean and be on a wave. And so that was the original thing that brought me along, that was in there. I just had to re-pull it out. And then what happens is, like you said, the difference between driving and being driven is that when you drive, you actually have control. When you're being driven, you don't have control, and you're being pushed by they pushes you wherever it wants to. But when you're driving, you have control. So in a way, then you start to become in control of your contentment, like your feeling of accomplishment, which is a very comfortable thing. It actually is so comfortable that you feel, okay, I'm good. I don't need to do a bunch of extra work. I'm in control of the thing. And so that's a tricky place, because then you're like, hey, I'm driving. I'm in control of my thing, in my contentment. I can make myself content. I don't need all this other stuff to make me content. Then what happens? You become complacent.
Apathetic, yeah.
So then you have to go, okay, well, I got to not have that happen. So how do I so then you have to keep setting. And I think that's why having goals and, having these things out in front of you, pushing you, but I believe that in your desire to continue to pursue that, you will be supplied with the goals that you need. Yeah. Just the willingness, just you being willing to pursue, it will come to you. It'll be like, oh, you're a hunter, I'll give you an animal. Like, I'll give you another one. I'll give you, it's like, you're a hunter, you're going to chase, I'm going to give you something to chase. And there is something to that. There's something that's real to that because I feel like every time I think I can't do, what can I do? I mean, I can do as much, but can I do more? Like, what am I going to wait for a 150-foot wave that maybe comes once every 100 years, or if it comes ever, and am I going to be in the spot and all that stuff? That's a setup for failure. So how do I kind of have something new that draws me in? And every time it seems like there's always a new one. Like, it's like, there's a new way to ride a wave, a new wave to ride, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not always
amazing.
Not always about increasing the challenge. It's about changing the mind expansion that comes with it.
Yeah.
And the growth. And
well, the challenge is still
the challenge is there.
It's still in Turkey. It's still crazy.
With you, it's interesting because the contentment thing really resonates, because I think that there's probably a lot of people that are listening, as well as, like myself, like I can relate, where contentment is scary, because I'm wired in such a way where I was raised that, like, if you're content, you're a normie, and that's dangerous. You never want to, you never want to be a normie, a sheep. You never want to, and there's such a difference between, like, if I could make up a term, like conscious contentment and like real contentment, like deep contentment, like being, your ability to say, I can lie on the floor and do an hour of breath work today, and it's the same as redlining on the assault bike. That's a deep contentment that someone that just has sort of a, if they have just a conscious contentment in their everyday kind of superficial life, then that contentment would be choosing X because it's easier, not because it's eliciting a different outcome or a different experience or a different pursuit, right? Yeah. So it's really difficult to wrestle with that, because every single day you're like, if you take what on the surface looks like the easier path, but that's what you think other people might think in some ways, right? Yeah. Or what I can speak for myself. It's what I think other people might think, which isn't my actual truth. If I choose that breath work, which on the surface, you're just going to sit on the fucking floor and breathe. Yeah. Try.
Well, it's also the way you do it. The way you do it, because you could do it in a way. And then also too, maybe for us, that one of the things that we have to wrestle with is, because we're on the opposite side, where we're on this other side where maybe choosing the easier thing for us is the harder thing to do.
Totally. 100%.
So all of a sudden, well, what's the hard thing to do? Well, choosing the easier thing. And they're like, but that's easier. But actually, no, for us to choose the easier thing is actually the more difficult thing to do. So there's some of that you wrestle with. Again, creating narratives that suit your thing. And I mean, I think that's the challenge too, is how, we're dancing with those. We have the luxuries to have these choices. And so I never forget that part as well. But you can make the simplest thing the hardest thing. Again, it's how you push it, I mean, again, it's not hard to make things hard. Like that's the thing. It's just, you can make hard things easy, but it's not hard to make easy things hard either. And people forget that. They think, oh yeah, well, that's the easy way. I go, well, I can do it in a way that's not that easy right now. You can try it. So, and also I think the mastery of anything is that you make things hard look easy. That's really where the true mastery comes from, right? That's in anything in any pursuit we have, is our whole objective in mastery is to make something difficult look easy. I mean, one of my daughters is learning tennis right now, and just the pursuit of mastery. There's some great quotes by a few different writers that talk about, the pursuit of mastery is such a worthy task, right? Of anything, mastering anything is, but to be masterful is to make it look simple. You watch a good ballerina, what's the big deal? Yeah. I mean, and the easier you make it look, actually, the harder it really is. Yeah.
My wife's
that's the irony of it.
That way with art. It's just like the people that are amazing artists. It's just like, how do they? It's effortless, right? But it's like clearly the amount of like mass, and it can never fully be mastered. But that's kind of the beauty of it, right? Yeah. So, well, man, I will. I'll link out to all your good stuff down below.
Thank you. And I wish I could remember them all, but I have a beautiful woman for that.
That's all good, man. Right on, brother.
Thanks,
man.
Aloha.